March 21, 1939. Warsaw, Poland. The Brühl Palace, seat of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sits beneath a sky that carries the weight of winter's final exhale. The Baroque facade, elegant and defiant, overlooks Pilsudski Square where pigeons scatter with each passing government vehicle. Inside, in a second-floor office lined with maps of a Europe that no longer resembles the one drawn at Versailles, Foreign Minister Józef Beck stands before a window, watching the city that does not yet know what he knows. The telegram arrived 47 minutes ago. Delivered by courier from the German embassy. Beck read it twice, then set it on his desk without comment. Now he stands, hands clasped behind his back, studying the street below as if the answer to an impossible question might be written in the movement of pedestrians and automobiles. Behind him, Undersecretary Jan Schembeck waits in silence. Schembeck is a career diplomat, a man who has spent 2 decades learning to read the temperature of a room, the intention behind a carefully chosen word. He recognizes the posture Beck has adopted. It is not the stance of a man considering options. It is the stance of a man who has already decided and is now measuring the cost. Beck turns from the window. His face carries the particular exhaustion of someone who has not slept properly in weeks but cannot afford the luxury of showing it. He is 48 years old, a veteran of the Polish legions who fought for independence when independence was a dream held by poets and soldiers. He has negotiated treaties with Hitler, signed non-aggression pacts, danced the careful dance of maintaining Polish sovereignty between 2 powers that would gladly erase it from the map. Now that dance has ended. Read it again, Beck says, gesturing to the telegram. Schembeck picks up the document. The paper is heavy, official German stationery embossed with the eagle and swastika. The message is brief, direct, stripped of diplomatic courtesy. Germany requests immediate negotiations regarding the return of Danzig to the Reich and the establishment of an extraterritorial highway and railway through the Polish corridor connecting East Prussia to the German mainland. The request includes a deadline. Poland is expected to respond favorably within 48 hours. It is not a request, Schembeck says quietly, setting the paper down. It is an ultimatum disguised as a diplomatic courtesy. Beck moves to his desk and sits. The office is organized with military precision. Files stacked in exact alignment. Pens arranged parallel to the desk edge. A single photograph in a silver frame shows Marshal Józef Pilsudski, the man who resurrected Poland from the grave of empires, the man Beck served as chief of staff until Pilsudski's death in 1935. The marshal's eyes seem to follow Beck as he reaches for a cigarette case, extracts one, and lights it with a match that flares briefly before settling into a steady ember. Ribbentrop believes we will accept, Beck says, exhaling smoke toward the ceiling. He believes that presenting this as a reasonable solution to territorial anomalies will allow us to save face while surrendering sovereignty. Will we accept? Schembeck asks, though he already knows the answer. He needs to hear Beck say it aloud, needs to confirm that the course Poland is about to take is deliberate, not impulsive. Beck's response comes without hesitation. No. The word hangs in the air between them, simple and absolute. Schembeck nods slowly, understanding the implications. Poland has spent 20 years rebuilding itself from partition, from being erased from maps, from being a language and a culture without a state. The corridor, that thin strip of territory connecting Poland to the Baltic Sea, is more than geography. It is proof that Poland exists as a sovereign nation, that it has the right to access to the sea, that it will not be divided again by powers that view it as negotiable space. They will not accept refusal, Schembeck says. Hitler has made Danzig a matter of national honor. The German press has been preparing their population for confrontation for months. Then there will be confrontation. Beck stands and moves to the wall map, studying the borders of Poland as if seeing them for the first time. The country is shaped like an irregular polygon, squeezed between Germany to the west and the Soviet Union to the east. Czechoslovakia to the south has already fallen, dismembered by the Munich agreement that Poland was not invited to attend. The agreement that sacrificed Czech sovereignty to buy what Britain and France called peace. Beck participated in that dismemberment. He authorized Polish forces to occupy the Zaolzie region when Czechoslovakia collapsed, a decision that earned Poland international condemnation and precisely zero additional security. Beck understood the moral failure of that action, but he also understood that in March 1939, morality is a luxury afforded to nations with strong allies and secure borders. Poland has neither. Call a cabinet meeting, Beck says, turning from the map. The Prime Minister needs to know. The President needs to know. We have 48 hours to formulate a response, but the decision is already made. We will refuse German demands. We will defend Polish sovereignty regardless of consequence. Schembeck moves toward the door, then pauses. Minister, if we refuse, and if Germany acts on that refusal, we will need Allied support. Britain and France have offered guarantees, but guarantees are not divisions. They are not aircraft or artillery. I am aware. Are we certain they will honor those guarantees? Munich suggests otherwise. Beck meets his undersecretary's eyes. We are certain of nothing except this: if we surrender Danzig and the corridor, we will have proven that Polish sovereignty is negotiable. If sovereignty is negotiable, then Poland does not exist. It is simply territory waiting to be redistributed. I will not be the foreign minister who presides over that. Schembeck nods and leaves. Beck returns to his desk and begins drafting Poland's response. The language must be precise, firm but not inflammatory. It must reject German demands while leaving a narrow diplomatic path forward, though Beck harbors no illusions that Germany will accept anything less than complete capitulation. As he writes, Beck considers the mathematics of Poland's position. The Polish army numbers approximately 1 million men under arms when fully mobilized. Modern equipment is limited. Poland has fewer than 400 operational tanks, most of them light reconnaissance vehicles unsuited for confronting German armor. The Air Force operates around 400 aircraft, many obsolete. Poland's industrial capacity cannot match Germany's, cannot produce weapons at the rate they will be consumed in modern warfare. But Poland has something Germany forgot to calculate. It has soldiers who remember partition, who remember fighting for independence against impossible odds. It has a population that has spent 123 years under foreign occupation and will not voluntarily return to that condition. It has terrain that becomes a nightmare for mechanized forces during autumn rains and winter snow. These factors will not win a war. But they might make the cost of that war high enough that Germany hesitates, that Britain and France have time to mobilize, that the mathematics of European security shift in Poland's favor. Beck finishes the draft response and sets down his pen. Outside, Warsaw continues its afternoon routine. Streetcars clatter along Marszałkowska Street. Office workers emerge from buildings for cigarette breaks. Children chase each other through squares where monuments to Polish heroes stand eternal watch. None of them know that their foreign minister has just committed Poland to a course that makes war not merely possible, but probable. The cabinet meeting convenes at 6:00 p.m. in the Belvedere Palace. President Ignacy Mościcki presides, a scientist by training who never sought political leadership but inherited it when Pilsudski died. Prime Minister Felicjan Sławoj-Składkowski sits to the president's right, a physician who served in the legions and understands the cost of national defense measured in casualty counts. Beck presents the German demands without editorial comment, reading Ribbentrop's telegram in its entirety. The ministers listen in silence. When Beck finishes, he sets the document on the conference table and waits. Minister of War Affairs Tadeusz Kasprzyk speaks first. Militarily, we cannot defeat Germany alone. Our best scenario is defensive operations that slow German advances while Britain and France mobilize. That requires time, terrain, and considerable Polish casualties. How considerable, the president asks. Kasprzyk does not flinch. Tens of thousands in the first weeks. Potentially hundreds of thousands if the war extends beyond autumn. Finance Minister Eugeniusz Kwiatkowski raises the economic dimension. Our treasury cannot sustain prolonged military operations. We have been purchasing equipment from France and Britain, but much of what we ordered will not arrive before summer. If war comes in spring, we will be fighting with what we have now, which is insufficient. Beck listens to each minister present obstacles, calculations, reasons why refusing Germany might be strategically unwise. He waits until all have spoken before responding. Everything you have said is accurate, Beck begins, his voice steady. We cannot defeat Germany militarily. We cannot sustain prolonged operations economically. We will suffer casualties that will devastate a generation. These are facts. But here is another fact. If we surrender Danzig and the corridor, we establish that Polish sovereignty exists only with German permission. Every future German demand will carry the implicit threat that refusal means war. We will spend the next decade surrendering territory piece by piece, until Poland exists only as a geographic expression with no independent will. The alternative is war now, Składkowski says, not as argument but as statement of fact. Yes. And you believe this is preferable to negotiation? Beck leans forward, hands flat on the table. I believe that some negotiations are surrender dressed in diplomatic language. Germany is not requesting minor border adjustments. They are demanding that we allow them to physically bisect our country with an extraterritorial corridor. They are demanding we surrender our only major port city. These demands are designed to reduce Poland to a German satellite. Acceptance would be slower than military conquest, but the result would be identical. President Mościcki removes his glasses and cleans them with a handkerchief, a gesture Beck has learned means the president is processing information that carries no good options. When Mościcki replaces his glasses, his expression has settled into resignation. If we refuse, and if war comes, do we have guarantees from Britain and France? The president asks. We have assurances, Beck responds carefully. British Prime Minister Chamberlain has stated publicly that Britain would support Poland if Polish independence were threatened. France has treaties of mutual assistance dating to 1921. But assurances are not divisions crossing the German frontier. They are diplomatic commitments that must be converted into military action, and that conversion requires time, political will, and circumstances that justify British and French casualties. So we would be alone initially. Yes, Mr. President. We would be alone. The room falls silent. Ministers study the table, the walls, their own hands. They are men who understand that the decision they make tonight will determine whether Poland survives as a sovereign state or becomes a footnote in German expansion. The weight of 35 million Polish citizens rests on this conference table. Moskiewicz looks at each minister in turn, reading their faces, gauging their resolve. When his eyes reach Beck, he holds the foreign minister's gaze for several seconds before speaking. Minister Beck, you have negotiated with Hitler directly. You have sat across tables from Ribbentrop, from Göring, from the apparatus of the German state. Tell me honestly, if we refuse these demands, is there any possibility Germany will accept our refusal without military action? Beck considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. He has indeed negotiated with Hitler, has watched the German Chancellor transform from a politician seeking legitimacy to a leader convinced that his will shapes reality. Beck has observed how Hitler responds to perceived weakness, how he interprets negotiation as submission. No, Mr. President, Beck says finally. Germany will not accept our refusal. They may delay military action for diplomatic appearances, but the trajectory is established. They believe Poland is isolated, that Britain and France will repeat Munich, that we will be abandoned to whatever fate Germany designs. They are testing whether Polish sovereignty is real or merely ceremonial. Our response will answer that question conclusively. Moskiewicz nods slowly and looks around the table once more. Does any minister believe we should accept German demands? No one speaks. The silence itself is the answer. Then we refuse, Moskiewicz says. Minister Beck, draft our response. Make clear that Poland maintains full sovereignty over Danzig and the corridor. Make clear that we will not negotiate terms that compromise Polish independence. Make clear that we expect Germany to honor existing treaties and international law. And make clear that Poland will defend its territory and its rights as a sovereign nation. Beck acknowledges the directive with a nod. The meeting continues for another 2 hours, discussing military preparations, diplomatic outreach to potential allies, civil defense measures, economic mobilization. But the fundamental decision has been made. Poland will not step back. March 22, 1939. Beck works through the night drafting Poland's formal response. The language must thread an impossible needle. Firm enough to clearly reject German demands, restrained enough to avoid providing Germany with propaganda that Poland is being unreasonable or aggressive. The response must speak to multiple audiences simultaneously, to Warsaw, to Berlin, to London and Paris, to the Polish people who will have to live with the consequences. By dawn, Beck has completed a draft that he believes achieves this balance. The note acknowledges Poland's desire for good relations with Germany, references the 1934 non-aggression pact that both nations signed, but clearly states that Poland cannot accept any proposal that would compromise its sovereignty or its access to the sea. The language is diplomatic but unyielding. Beck sends the draft to President Moskiewicz for approval. While waiting, he summons the British and French ambassadors for separate meetings. The conversations are carefully choreographed. Beck does not ask for immediate military support, that would appear desperate. Instead, He informs both ambassadors that Poland has received unacceptable demands from Germany and that Poland will refuse those demands regardless of consequences. He requests confirmation that Britain and France will honor their stated commitments to Polish independence. British Ambassador Sir Howard Kennard responds with appropriate diplomatic assurances. His government stands by its guarantees. France will honor its treaties. But Kennard also cautions that any military response will require time to organize, and that Poland should avoid provocative actions that might give Germany justification for military operations. Beck thanks the ambassador and does not point out the inherent contradiction in that advice. Poland refusing to surrender territory is somehow provocative, while Germany demanding that territory is apparently reasonable diplomacy. The Munich mentality still governs Western European thinking, the belief that maintaining peace requires perpetual concession to whoever threatens war most convincingly. The French ambassador expresses similar sentiments with additional emphasis on the need for Poland to coordinate military planning with French General Staff. Beck agrees in principle but privately doubts that French military support will materialize quickly enough to affect the initial phases of any German offensive. France is building the Maginot Line and preparing to defend its own borders. The idea that French divisions will immediately march into Germany to relieve pressure on Poland is optimistic at best. March 23, 1939. Beck delivers Poland's formal rejection to the German embassy at noon. The German ambassador receives the document without comment, his face professionally neutral. He promises to forward it to Berlin immediately. Beck knows that within hours, Ribbentrop will be reading Poland's refusal, and Hitler will be making decisions that will determine the next chapter of European history. Beck returns to his office and sits at his desk, suddenly aware of the exhaustion that has accumulated over the past 48 hours. He has slept perhaps 6 hours total since the German telegram arrived. His body demands rest, but his mind continues processing scenarios, calculating probabilities, preparing for diplomatic maneuvers that will be required in the coming days and weeks. Schembeck enters with updated intelligence reports. The German press is increasing anti-Polish rhetoric. Stories about Polish mistreatment of ethnic Germans in the corridor are appearing with greater frequency and more inflammatory language. The propaganda apparatus is preparing the German population for conflict, establishing the narrative that Poland is the aggressor, that Germany is simply defending the rights of German citizens, that any military action will be Poland's fault. Beck reads the reports and recognizes the pattern. This is how modern wars are justified, through manufactured grievances amplified through mass media until the population demands action. Germany used this approach in Czechoslovakia, claiming to defend Sudeten Germans. Now they are using it in Poland, claiming to protect Danzigers. The script is familiar. Only the location has changed. How much time do we have? Schembeck asks. Beck considers the question. Hitler is not impulsive, despite his reputation. He plans carefully, ensures that Germany has military advantage before committing to action. The Wehrmacht is not yet fully prepared for major operations. Spring weather makes large-scale mobilization difficult. Germany will want to consolidate its recent gains, absorb Czechoslovakia's industrial capacity, complete military preparations. Months, Beck says. Late summer or early autumn. Hitler will wait for favorable conditions. But he will come. Our rejection has made that inevitable. Can we use that time to prepare? We can try. But preparation requires resources we do not have and allies who are uncertain. Our best option is to make German aggression so obviously unjustified that Britain and France have no political choice but to respond with military force. Schembeck nods and leaves Beck alone with his thoughts. The foreign minister lights another cigarette and returns to the window overlooking Pilsudski Square. The spring afternoon is clear, the sky that particular shade of blue that suggests winter has finally surrendered its hold. People move through the square without urgency, living ordinary lives in a city that sits unknowingly at the edge of catastrophe. Beck wonders how many of them understand what has just happened. How many realize that their foreign minister has committed Poland to a course that makes war not merely possible but likely? How many will curse him when the bombs fall, when their homes are destroyed, when their sons and husbands and fathers do not return from battlefields that exist only because Poland refused to negotiate away its sovereignty? But Beck also knows what acceptance would have meant. It would have meant teaching a generation of Poles that independence is conditional, that sovereignty can be surrendered whenever a stronger power demands it, that Poland exists only because Germany permits it to exist. That lesson would have been more destructive than any military defeat, because it would have destroyed the psychological foundation of nationhood itself. Marshal Pilsudski used to say that Poland must be strong enough that no one tries to erase it, but not so weak that erasure becomes easy. Beck has just ensured that erasure will not be easy. Whether Poland is strong enough to survive the attempt remains to be seen. April 1939 passes in a fog of diplomatic activity. Beck travels to London to meet with British officials, seeking confirmation of military support. He receives warm words and vague promises. He travels to Paris for similar meetings with similar results. The Western democracies want Poland to resist German expansion, but they are not yet willing to commit concrete military forces to that resistance. They want Poland to be strong enough to deter Germany but do not want to provide the resources that would make that strength possible. Beck returns to Warsaw understanding that Poland will face the initial German assault alone. Britain and France will eventually enter the war, their political commitments and strategic interests make that inevitable, but the first weeks, perhaps the first months, will belong to Poland and Germany alone. The Polish General Staff accelerates military preparations. Reserve units are quietly mobilized. Equipment purchases are expedited. Defense plans are reviewed and updated. But everyone involved understands that preparation has limits when the fundamental balance of forces is so heavily weighted against you. May 1939 brings increasingly aggressive German rhetoric. Hitler delivers a speech in the Reichstag denouncing the Polish corridor as an intolerable injustice, a wound inflicted on Germany by the Versailles Treaty. He demands that this wound be healed, that German territory be reconnected, that the rights of Danzig's German population be restored. The speech receives thunderous applause from Nazi Party members and is broadcast across Germany through radio and newsreel. Beck drafts Poland's response, a carefully worded statement that refuses to be drawn into a propaganda war. Poland will not negotiate under threat. Poland maintains its sovereign rights. Poland expects Germany to honor its treaty obligations. The response is delivered through diplomatic channels and published in Polish newspapers, but Beck knows it will have no effect on Hitler's planning. The diplomatic phase has ended. What comes next will be decided by military force, not diplomatic notes. Throughout June and July, Beck continues his duties as foreign minister, conducting routine diplomacy while knowing that nothing routine exists anymore. Every meeting, every treaty discussion, every protocol event carries the shadow of coming war. Foreign diplomats study Beck's face, trying to read whether Poland will truly fight or will ultimately accept some face-saving compromise. Beck gives them nothing to read. His expression remains neutral, professional, giving no indication of the calculations occurring behind it. In early August, rumors emerge of German military movements near the Polish border. Wehrmacht units are repositioning, supply depots are being established, roads are being improved to handle heavy military traffic. German officials provide explanations, routine training exercises, defensive preparations in case Poland becomes aggressive. Beck recognizes these explanations as diplomatic cover for offensive preparations. He calls another cabinet meeting to discuss immediate mobilization. The military argues for calling up reserves now, before Germany achieves complete tactical surprise. The civilian ministers worry that mobilization will be interpreted as Polish aggression, giving Germany the propaganda victory they seek. The debate continues for hours without resolution. Beck sits through these discussions understanding that Poland faces an impossible dilemma. Mobilize too early, and Poland appears to be the aggressor, potentially undermining British and French support. Mobilize too late, and Polish forces will be caught unprepared when German armor crosses the frontier. There is no correct answer, only choices that trade one risk for another. The meeting ends with a compromise, partial mobilization disguised as training exercises. It is insufficient for full defense but hopefully insufficient to justify German claims of Polish aggression. Beck leaves the meeting knowing that they have just tried to split the difference on a question that allows no middle ground. August 23, 1939. News arrives that destroys what remains of Poland's strategic position. Germany and the Soviet Union have signed a non-aggression pact. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, as it will be known, commits both totalitarian powers to peaceful relations for 10 years. Secret protocols, not yet known to Beck or to Western governments, divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland has just been erased from the map through diplomatic agreements between the two powers that border it. Beck receives the news from Schembeck, who delivers the report with the careful neutrality of a man announcing a death sentence. The foreign minister reads the intelligence summary twice, understanding immediately what this means. Poland cannot fight Germany and the Soviet Union simultaneously. If both powers coordinate their actions, Polish defense becomes mathematically impossible. This changes everything, Schembeck says quietly. No, Beck responds, setting down the report. This changes nothing. We knew Soviet Union could not be trusted. We knew they viewed Poland as territory to be divided, not as a sovereign state to be respected. This pact simply makes their intentions explicit. Our decision remains unchanged. We will not surrender sovereignty regardless of the forces arrayed against us. Minister, we cannot win. Winning was never the objective. Surviving as a sovereign nation is the objective. If we fight and lose, we lose as Poland. If we surrender without fighting, we lose Poland itself. The distinction matters. Schembeck opens his mouth to respond, then closes it. He has worked with Beck long enough to recognize when argument is futile. The foreign minister has made his decision, and that decision is final. August 31, 1939. German forces are positioned along the entire Polish frontier. The Wehrmacht has completed its preparations. Supply lines are established, units are at full strength, commanders have received their orders. All that remains is the pretext, the manufactured incident that will justify invasion. Beck works late into the evening, knowing that these are the final hours of peace. The phone on his desk rings at 11:47 p.m. It is Schembeck with news that German radio is reporting a Polish attack on the Gliwice radio station, claiming that Polish forces crossed the border and seized German territory. The report is fabricated. Beck knows this immediately, but fabrication is irrelevant. Germany has its pretext. Beck hangs up the phone and sits in silence. The Baroque office is dark except for the desk lamp that casts shadows across maps and documents. Outside, Warsaw sleeps, unaware that tomorrow morning will begin a war that will consume millions of lives and redraw the map of Europe. The foreign minister who refused to step back sits alone with his decision. He does not know that Poland will be conquered in 5 weeks. He does not know that Britain and France will declare war but provide minimal military support. He does not know that 6 years of occupation will follow, that millions of Polish citizens will die, that Warsaw itself will be systematically destroyed. What he knows is this: Poland refused to surrender its sovereignty without a fight. Poland proved that Polish independence is not negotiable, not conditional, not dependent on the permission of stronger powers. That refusal will cost everything. But the alternative would have cost something more precious than territory or lives. It would have cost the idea of Poland itself. Beck extinguishes his cigarette and begins drafting the statement Poland will release when Germany invades. The language must be precise, must establish for history that Poland was the victim of aggression, not the perpetrator. That Poland fought because it had no honorable alternative. That Polish soldiers died defending something worth defending. He writes through the night, and when dawn breaks on September 1, 1939, German armor is already crossing the frontier, German aircraft are already bombing Polish cities, and the war that Józef Beck made inevitable through his refusal has begun. The foreign minister who would not step back has kept his nation's sovereignty intact for as long as diplomacy allowed. What comes next will be written in blood and ruins and the stubborn refusal of a people to accept erasure. Beck's decision in March guaranteed that when Poland fell, it would fall fighting. In the mathematics of national survival, sometimes that is the only victory possible. If you've made it this far, you've just heard the story of a decision that shaped the beginning of World War II, not through grand strategy or military genius, but through one man's refusal to negotiate away his country's right to exist. This is the kind of story we tell here. The moments when history turned on a decision made in hours, not years. Consider subscribing if these forgotten turning points matter to you. There are more stories waiting, and they deserve to be remembered.